I want to start today's discussion with the leader who's very important to me, my mother. My mother grew up in World War II in England. Pretty tough time. And as part of growing up as a child in England, she was enlisted into the Home Guard. Her job would be to do things like help lift the rifle up to the men who they thought would have to protect the houses in case the Germans invaded. And so they were also taught how to survive out in the woods in case they were ever invaded. And as she grew up, the outdoors and being a successful woodsman was very important to her. She became a Girl Guide, the war's over, but then for the rest of her life, the challenges of the outdoors just became a part of who she was. And as we grew up in this country, she and my father, my mother was normally the Girl Scout leader or the Boy Scout leader, and our life revolved around camping outdoors and being successful scouts. So one of the things my mother had was using the challenges of the outdoors. But she sort of had this quirk. In her mind, you were not going to be a successful outdoorsman or a woodsman unless you could start a fire with a single match. And so as we grew up in the family and we would go on these outings, we were taught how to gather tinder and kindling and build a perfect fire. And she would show us how to light the fire with a single match. And she would say things like, no cheating, no doing the Boy Scout thing and putting paper in there. If you're ever stuck in the woods, you might not have paper around. And as I grew older, I realized a lot of this intensity about starting this fire with the one match had to do with how she grew up. And the thought that maybe at some point as a child she might have had to live in the woods. And every match would count because they might not be able to get more. And then as we grew older, the one match fire became a test. And she felt that at any given day, when we were in the woods as kids, she ought to be able to say, tonight's the night. I'm going to give you one match. You're going to put your fire together, and you're going to start the fire. And being who she is, she would let us know there'd be consequences if we didn't pass the test. If we didn't start the fire, that night, there'd be no campfire. There'd be no singing around the campfire. There'd be no hot meal that night because we wouldn't have a fire. And most egregious of all to us as kids, that meant there'd be no s'mores. So we all knew at some point we were going to be tested by mom. When we were stationed, my dad was Air Force, we were stationed in Alaska. And we would go every summer to Mount McKinley National Park. There were four of us, boy, girl, I was the second. My sister was the youngest, and she was all of 8 years old. We had a day of hiking, it was wet, we were excited, we were happy, we're coming into the camp, looking forward to this fire, and all of a sudden, and to this day, my mother still cannot explain to me what wild hair crept into her. She turned to my younger sister and said, tonight's your night. Start the fire with one match. Now, my brothers and I, we were in shock. We were just, this is not fair, this is not right, oh my God. She's 8 years old. And my mother's like, just looking at us like most of you have had a parent look at you, so we knew civil disobedience was not a method. We were going to have to help my sister light this fire, or we were going to suffer. And so it's still raining. We help her gather her kindling and tinder. My older brother sacrifices his poncho, and my younger brother and I, we've got it as close to the ground with all the material underneath. And then my younger sister, and all of 8 years old, with her single match, slings underneath this poncho, slides underneath. And I mean, this could have been a great field and stream story. And literally, we're all there praying, and she strikes her match, and the fire lights. And it was like, glory be to God. We were so excited. We're jumping up and down, we're pounding my sister on the back. We were all so happy. We were successful. And then as years went by, I realized there was a lot more to that one-match fire. That has to do with leadership. That one thing I learned, that when you have success as an individual, there can be great satisfaction. But when you have success as a team, there can be even greater satisfaction. My mother taught us that you can use challenge to form your team. But there were other things I figured out from the one-match fire. One, my mother, the leader, the Girl Scout leader, had told us what the standard was. One match, get the fire going. But she'd also trained us all along how to get the one match fire going. So she set the standards, she trained us, and then when the time of challenge came, we knew if we didn't meet that standard, there'd be consequences. And so she was teaching us accountability. And it's interesting. For the rest of my life and career, leadership is often distilled into those simple elements. Setting standards, training people, holding them accountable when they fail. But there's another piece. Deep down as kids, we knew my mother was our safety net. She would never let us fail, truly fail and starve to death. And so there's another part of leadership that's about being the safety net. So when your people stumble, you're there to help pick them up and lead them, help them be the successful individuals they're destined to be.